Hi y'all. Today I'm going to be making my dad's beef stew. Okay, in this crock pot, I have it on the 10-hour setting because I'm going to let this cook overnight. And I'm going to add 2 cups of apple juice. It doesn't have to be anything fancy or anything like that. They're just regular apple juice, alright? And if that's not enough to cover, then I'm going to add some water because I want it to be covered. And I'm also going to be adding onions and potatoes, but I'm going to cook the potatoes separately because I can't fit all this meat and potatoes into the crock pot. So there you have it. You have 2 cups of apple juice, which is like 1 solo cup, okay, and then 2 solo cups there of water and 2 pounds of stewed beef. And so stay tuned, I'll be right back. Okay, now I have the potatoes peeled and I'm getting ready to dice them. I'm going to do large chunks because you don't want your potatoes to cook down. And these are russets also. Now, you can use a waxy potato, but I really don't like the flavor. I prefer the russets, but they just tend to cook down more, so larger chunks, okay? And I always like sit in front of the TV or whatever with one of these trays, and you can easily get a 5-pound bag of potatoes peeled, you know, and put the peels on one side. So that's just a nice little tip for, you know, if you just want to, you know, veg out and not have to work too hard. Okay, I was talking about the size of potatoes that you need. I guess these are about, I don't know, 2-inch maybe. Pretty good sized chunks. And that's what you want. So this is like a medium sized potato, fits in my hand. And as you can see, I cut it into just 4 chunks. So this is like perfect. This potato is just a little bit larger, and so I cut it in half lengthwise and then cut it into thirds, so 6 pieces. And so that's about how you want them. Okay, now I have my 5 pounds of potatoes all peeled and diced into big chunks, covered in water, okay? I'm going to cover this pot. I'm going to put it in the fridge overnight while the meat cooks. I don't want to cook these potatoes separate. I'm just keeping them separate right now because there's not room in the crock pot for them and the meat. So what I'm going to do tomorrow is after the meat is done, I'm going to strain the broth, okay? And I'm going to add the meat and the broth to the potatoes so that the potatoes can absorb the meat flavor. That's why we don't want to cook them separately from the meat. We want all the flavors to blend together. Okay, I'm getting ready to slice the onions, and I always take and angle my knife and cut this hard piece out of the top of the onion because it just really, I don't know, it's not very pleasant. And so now that I've done that, I'm ready to slice the onions. I cut the onion in half, okay, and then I sliced it. Oh, these are about maybe 1/2 inch or something like that. And so I'm going to break them apart, and I'm going to add them to the beef here in just a minute. Okay, now I've added the onions. I'm going to close the lid, but before that I want to address something. You might be saying, well, where's the salt? Where is the packet of seasoning or whatever that you would add to beef stew? I don't use those because they have salt, and I don't salt it while it's cooking because salt can make meat or beef tougher during the cooking process. Now, I do understand that sometimes salt is used to tenderize like a steak or something like that, but I have found that that makes meat taste too salty to me. So I don't like cooking it with salt. I'm going to add salt at the end. So time to close the lid, alright? And probably in about 8 hours or so, the meat is going to be tender enough to add to the potatoes and finish this thing up. Alrighty then. The stewed beef and onions have cooked overnight in a mixture of apple juice and water.
No salt, no pepper, nothing like that at this stage. I always like to add that at the end so that my meals don't get too salty, because salt changes over time in a dish, and I just really believe it's best to wait and add it at the end. So now I'm going to add this mixture to my potatoes and boil it until the potatoes are done. Okay, here are the potatoes. I had covered them with water and put them in the refrigerator overnight. And so I have strained them. And now I'm going to add the beef and onions and the beef broth. This mixture is very hot, and so I'm going to be using a ladle to transfer all of this. And I'm just going to take my time, okay? Because if I try to pick up this lining right here and dump it into the potatoes, I'm afraid it's just too heavy for that right now. I might do that at the end, but for now, I'm going to go about it this way. Okay, I've transferred all of the beef stew mixture over to the potatoes, and I've given it a stir, and I'm going to be bringing this to a boil, and so I'm going to add a solo cup of water. I don't want to add too much water because I don't want to dilute the beef broth. While all this is going on, it's time to start some cornbread. Okay, I have transferred the beef and onion mixture, of course, into this pan with the potatoes. I've added one more solo cup of water, okay, and I brought this to a boil, and now that I've brought it to a boil, I'm going to put a lid on, and I'm going to set the temperature on low, and I'm going to check the potatoes in about 10 minutes. Okay, it's been about 10 or 15 minutes, and now I'm going to test a potato for fork tenderness to see if it breaks apart, and it doesn't. Okay, it's sticking to the fork. So I'm going to I'm just going to put that back in there, okay, and I'm going to put the lid back on, and I'm going to come back in about 5 minutes because they're awfully close, and I'm going to test them again. Get back down in there. All right, so stay tuned. While that's going, I've sliced up the cornbread, okay, and I have put it on the edge of the plate like this so that it doesn't get soggy, so that air can circulate. And I guess you could say that my cornbread is done in the middle, ha. And it's going to be just delicious with the beef stew. Also, my cornbread recipe, there's going to be a link in the description box, so just click on that link and check that out. Okay, I'm going to test these potatoes for fork tenderness, all right? And as you can see, breaks right apart. So the beef stew is done, and so now it's time to add salt. Okay, this is the type of salt I use, Morton fine sea salt. And I added a teaspoon. I gave it a good stir. I felt like it needed just a little more, and so I added another teaspoon and gave it a stir and tasted it again. And now it has what I call a baseline of salt. And at this point, you can serve it and let people salt to their own taste. Now I'm going to add a half teaspoon of black pepper and give it a stir. Okay, there you have it. You have that nice beef stew with the beef broth and the salt and pepper, onions and potatoes and stew beef. It just looks great. And I'm going to add some softened butter to the cornbread. And this brings back great memories for me because while I was at school, when I was growing up, I would come home and my dad would have this beef stew waiting on the stove for me. And we would sit there and have dinner and talk and laugh, and it was just such a great time, and I really enjoyed his beef stew, and so I wanted to share it with you. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you try the recipe. Have a great day. Bye-bye.